Good afternoon and welcome to this panel organized by the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia. I want to welcome people in the room here and on Zoom. A panel that examines European elections 2023, both elections that happened in Spain in the summer, Slovakia, and then Poland very recently, and in the Netherlands later this fall. My name is Geneviève Zubrzycki. I'm director of the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia and the Center for European Studies, and I have the pleasure to introduce our speakers, to moderate the panel, and to facilitate the discussion afterwards. I will introduce our speakers in the order in which they will speak. First, we have Professor Brian Porter-Szűcs, who's Arthur F. Thurnau Professor of History here at the University of Michigan. He's the author of several important books on Poland, When Nationalism Began to Hate, Imagining Modern Politics in 19th Century Poland, Faith and Fatherland, Catholicism, Modernity in Poland, and most recently, Poland and the Modern World, Beyond Martyrdom. All three books were translated into Polish to much acclaim, actually creating a lot of debate and discussion, especially about the last one. The last book has been especially well received and creating lots of discussion. Peter Terem will join us on Zoom. We don't see him on the screen yet. He's in Slovakia. He's professor and head of international relations and diplomacy at Matej Bel University in Banská Bystrica in the Slovak Republic. His research focuses on the foreign policy of the Slovak Republic, the use of soft power in the strategies of small states, and the external relations of the EU. He has served on the Slovak National Convention on the EU, on the board for the Slovak Ministry of Defense, and as senior fellow of the GlobeSec Academy Center in Bratislava. He was a Fulbright Research Fellow at Boston College in 2015, and most importantly, he was a Weiser Professional Development Fellow here at the University of Michigan in 2019. He has written several books and contributes to international relations journals, and he's also a frequent political commentator for RTVS, the radio and television of Slovakia. So Peter will be speaking about recent elections in Slovakia. Next, we will have a brief presentation by Julián Casanova, who's professor of contemporary history at the University of Zaragoza and visiting professor at the Central University in Vienna. Professor Casanova is one of Spain's foremost historians of the 20th century and an expert on the Spanish Civil War, has published many books in both Spanish and English, and some have been translated in many other languages. He was a visiting professor at a number of prestigious universities in Europe and the Americas, including Harvard, the New School for Social Research in New York, and the University of Michigan, where he was Distinguished Fellow, or the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia's Distinguished Fellow in 2022-23, just last year. Last, we will have a presentation by Annemarie Toebosch. I'm sorry if I massacred your name. Was that? Okay. She's a Chomskyan linguist at the University of Michigan, serving as director of Dutch Studies in the Germanic department. She's also affiliated faculty in Judaic Studies. Her writing in Dutch politics has been published in The Conversation, Newsweek, and Truthout. So welcome to our speakers, two online, so Professor Casanova and Professor Terem will be on Zoom. On the small screen here to make them part of the panel. And first I will invite Brian Porter-Szűcs to come to the podium for his presentation. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. So, can I get my presentation up on the screen?
Working on it.
because I actually wanted to start with the end of the story, because at least for it's a very rare experience for someone who works on Poland, I get to tell a story with a happy ending. Yeah. And actually, yeah, I get to be very optimistic today. Out of character. The results of the elections last week in Poland were nothing short of stunning. Here is the average of the surveys taken, of all the various surveys taken in the last 2 weeks before the election. And had things turned out this way, because of the complicated arithmetic of the Hunt method, which many of you might be familiar with, the very complex formula for allocating seats in proportional representation systems, many of them, this would have led to an exact tie in the Polish parliament between the forces of the right and the forces of democracy. That would have been, to say the least, problematic. Who knows what would have happened in a case like that? It would have certainly been chaos, probably months of chaos, leading to new elections, which also probably wouldn't have resolved anything. And it was very concerning. I was not optimistic going into this. But here's what happened. These are the actual results. I think many commentators realized there was a possibility that the democratically oriented parties of the center left and center right might get a majority, but I don't know that anyone was predicting that it would be this large. They got 17 seats more than they needed. Once this got allocated to seats in the Sejm, which is the Polish parliament, they have 248 seats, which is 17 more than they need in order to have a majority. So even if there are some, stray defections or factional problems, they have quite a secure majority. Now, it's not enough to override a presidential veto, which might be a problem in the years ahead, but it's secure. And there is no doubt as to who the next prime minister is going to be and how this is going to turn out. It might take a little while to shake out the details, but at the latest, by mid-December, we are going to have a new government in Poland. More important, though, and this is really what I want to talk about today than the results themselves, are what we find when we dig a little bit deeper into the statistics. The biggest one is this one. The voter turnout was almost 75%, including, and I've focused on the winning województwo there, the province, which is Mazovia, around the capital of Warsaw. Almost 80% of eligible voters cast ballots. And I can't even wrap my head around that. That is amazing. That's a level of mobilization, certainly, that Poland has never seen. Just to give a point of comparison, in the seminal elections of 1989, which brought an end to communist rule in Poland, around 2/3 of the eligible voters cast a ballot. There was a sense in Poland, a very strong sense, that the stakes today were higher. The stakes now were higher than they were in 1989. And I actually think that is correct. I think they were higher this time. Because back in 1989, it was very clear that where sort of the winds of history were blowing. The fact that all of Eastern Europe communist countries fell within months after the Polish victory shows that there was something big going on. And even inside the Communist Party, the reformists had already taken over. So while there was a lot at stake, to be sure, it's nothing like today, where there was a real fork in the road for Poland. A victory for law and justice would have led to a consolidation of one-party rule, to a transformation of Poland into something closer to Hungary, or perhaps even worse. and a very, very bleak future. I'm not saying the future is great, but it is not that. And this was a vote for parliamentary democracy. Now, as you can see from those results, it's not an overwhelming victory. So about 53% of this massive turnout opted for one or another of the pro-democracy parties. This is very different, though, from what happened 8 years ago. In 2015, when peace came to power, when Law and Justice, the former ruling party, came to power, they had 38% of the vote. And they only got power because of an amazing, lineup of the stars that ensured that the main left-wing party didn't even get any seats because they fell below the electoral threshold, and it led to 38% becoming a majority in the parliament. A bit of a fluke. It was not a sign that there had been some transformation in Polish society, that Poland had chosen an anti-democratic path, nothing like that. It was an electoral fluke. Now they consolidated their power and won more decisively in 2019, although even then they still had a majority of just over 40% of the vote. What we've seen this week is different, is leading me to be much more optimistic. This, even though it's only a 53% vote for the democratically oriented parties, they clearly represent a trend, and I can show you that. Here are the last three elections that have happened in Poland: 2015, 2019, and 2023. And you can see that the biggest development here is actually not the change in party support, but the change in the I don't care party, right? The did not vote party. Went from being, that party won every single Polish election since 1989, until last week, when they came in third. That is a huge change. That is representing something that's happening. Something that we can see it is in part a reflection of how dire the stake, how high the stakes are. But the stakes were also high in 2019, and they were high in 2015. What we can see, I should have taken this further back. What we can see is that this increased voter turnout is a trend. It's a pretty steady trend that's going on. So the country is becoming more politicized. Now that can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? It depends. But I think in this case, it is something that can give us some optimism, particularly if we break it down even more closely. I've grouped together parties of the center, the right, and the left here. But let's dig in a little bit more. If we look at those who did not vote, this is based on the Ipsos polling firm. They did the exit survey, exit polls, so to speak. The did not vote people who did not vote in 2019, but did vote this time. What did they do? Well, 30% of them went to Civic Platform, which is pretty much what Civic Platform got in the overall election. Just under 20% went to a center-right party coalition of parties called the Third Way. 15% went to the New Left. Only 15% went to Peace. Now, if you think about these numbers for a minute, they might seem to imply that since the previously non-voting public, they tended to cluster towards the center-left or center-right. And that would seem to imply that both the left and the right have limited potential for growth. In other words, when you get the biggest possible mobilization and the biggest possible size of the electorate, that the right and the left shrink and the center grows. That might seem to be the case, but actually, if we dig yet further, we see that it's not entirely that. It's not even. on the left and on the right. The new left, first of all, the 15% there, that's significantly better than they actually got in the overall electorate. So they, of the group of people that didn't vote, when they voted, they were more likely than usual to go left. Moreover, the issues on which they centered their campaign, which were separation of church and state, abortion rights, and housing policy were the three biggest things they emphasized in their advertising. All of those things show that they are on the side of the vast majority of the Polish population. For example, a poll earlier this year showed that 83.7% of respondents want to roll back the very strict abortion law, anti-abortion law that Law and Justice put into effect. So that is as big a consensus as I think you're going to get. And a full 56% want completely free open abortions up to the 12th week of pregnancy. The remainder want some restrictions, but still permissible. Currently, abortion is, for almost all cases, outlawed. Another survey, this was from last year, 2022, showed that 70% of those surveyed supported eliminating all the legal privileges and state financing that go to the Roman Catholic Church. The support for the Roman Catholic Church has evaporated, has really evaporated. 44% would like religion to be taken out of the schools, and if you survey young people, it's basically everybody. The number of kids that are high school students that are going to religion classes in Poland has gone down to in the 20% thereabouts. Oh, it does vary from region to region. And if we look at young people, we can see, this is just voters under 30 years of age in this most recent election, we can see that the left gets larger among younger voters with 17% of the vote. So there is room for growth as the population, as this group moves up. Moreover, if we look at the voter turnout, we can see that this generation of young people is mobilized as never before. Can you imagine in the United States 70% of voters under 30 voting? I mean, it's unbelievable, right? But yet they did. They still aren't voting as often as other generations. But notice the older generation is getting disillusioned, and this, moreover, is where PiS's support is. If we look at the party support by age, now we see that there is a pronounced trend going on here. The support for the Law and Justice is up here. And well, as much as I hate to admit it, my generation is fading away. And so we're not going to be providing anybody's base of support going forward. The young people, they have very little interest in Law and Justice. Law and Justice becomes a marginal party among young voters, not even close to anything that could gain power. This also, and I'll wrap this up here, this also plays out with place of residence. Poland is urbanizing. It has been urbanizing quite steadily. It's a common myth I think a lot of people have in their mind. Poland, they think of this agrarian country. They think of peasants and a farming population. That hasn't been true for 2 generations. Poland became a majority urban in 1960-something. Although it leveled off over the last several years, probably because of COVID, it has continually become more and more urban. As it becomes more and more urban, it also tilts more and more to the left. And so we can see that this too is a trend that is very much pushing away from the sort of forces that brought Law and Justice to power. Putting all this data together and summing up, we get a picture of a society that is shifting to the left. Now, it is probably not to the left that the Polish left would like. The Polish left the party which is actually called the left, the new left now, is frustrated right now because they lost votes based on 2019. They're not doing as well, but their issues are. And moreover, the formerly center-right party that is now going to lead the current government coalition has shifted dramatically to the left, and really now the civic platform now really has to be called a center-left party. Pretty comparable to sort of mainstream Democrats in the United States. So, the sort of social democratic left, I'm not sure that's where things are moving, but a sort of left liberal future is becoming, I think, increasingly secure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. We now have a presentation by Professor Terem.
Thank you very much for invitation.
We should see you. We don't see you yet.
Yeah.
Just hold on just 1 second.
Everything is okay?
Do we see him? We don't see him. Okay, good, good. Welcome.
Thank you, Geneviève. Thank you very much for the invitation for this kind of discussion about the European elections. It's an honor for me to be part of such a brilliant panel. I am also very happy that, although only virtually, I can once again be at the University of Michigan, where thanks to the Ronan Island Weiser Professional Award, I was able to spend an amazing 6 weeks in October and September 2019. So let me present the results of early parliamentary elections in Slovakia, which took place on September 3rd. First, I would like to very briefly show you why this election were marked as a turning point. I know simply all elections constitute a turning point in political reality, but due to the context of the event of the previous elections period, even due to the context of the election period 2016-2020, is necessary to explain some issues. So then I would like to, of course, explain the election results, government coalition profile, and of course, some anticipation of strategic orientation of our foreign and security policy the next months, next years. Then I would like to finish my presentation introducing our research, which we are dealing with the cooperation with the European Institute in Florence. So why these elections were marked as a turning point? So it is due to the context, as I mentioned before, of the events of the previous election period, even due to the context of the election period 2016-2020, of course, due to the threat of strengthening authoritarian elements in our governance, due to the threat of strengthening extremist parties, about weakening the fight against corruption, and of course, due to the threats of strategic orientation of foreign and security policy, even about the future of civil society. So the elections that took place on September 30 brought the following results. The winner of the elections was the Smer Social Democratic Party with almost 23% of the votes. Progressive Slovakia came second with almost 18% of votes, and so-called Hlas or Voice Social Democracy came third with 15% of votes. For more parties got into the parliament, coalition of parties Olano, Friends, Christian Union, and For People, led by former Prime Minister Igor Matovic, Christian Democratic Party, Freedom and Solidarity, Liberal Party, and the nationalist extremist party, Slovak National Party. So if we look at the electoral process in Slovakia, using, for example, Durbin spatial regression model, we see that the factor of ethnicity has a high explanatory power, followed by the indicators of education, age, and unemployment. So the religiosity factor has the least explanatory power. The question of ethnicity has the larger share in explanation of voting behavior in the south and North Slovakia as well. So, and religiosity explain voting behavior best in the north and maybe sometimes in South Slovakia as well. So the result of the election is the following distribution of 150 seats in the parliament. So the parliamentary election, of course, had a relatively high turnout, almost 70%. So the mobilization was very high. Thus, the results better reflect the opinions and values of society. So what I would like to say is that the new government coalition is now, for example, today was the government was appointed today at 3 p.m. It was some shift because there was postponed an hour later. But let's see what is the profile of the present ruling parties in Slovakia. So Smer Social Democracy is one of the most important political parties in Slovakia in recent years. It is headed by founder and ex-prime minister Robert Fico. Fico previously served as Slovakia prime minister for more than a decade, first between 2006 and 2010, and then again from 2012 to 2018. During the Smer government in 2006-2010, Slovakia entered the Schengen area, adopted the euro. However, due to the corruption cases and political scandals, Fico was forced to resign as a prime minister. So after the last election, the party ended up in opposition in 2020. They gained new voters by leaning towards nationalism and proclaiming some of the theses of Kremlin propaganda about the Russian-Ukrainian war. So Smer Slovak Social Democracy stands behind the idea of European integration, which is a unique project worthy of protection and considers membership in the European Union as irreplaceable. At the same time, however, he doesn't reject criticism on the EU. The EU is currently not properly managed and many decisions cause public disapproval in Slovakia, the document states. So this is, since the migration crisis 2015, the party has started leaning towards radical opinions. Many analysts point to the rhetoric of Smer, which on key issues doesn't differ at all from extreme right-wing parties. Leaders of the party very often uses Russian narratives, attacks Western allies. So proximity to the nationalist parties of Smer brought political points. So his tenure as a prime minister will show whether the rhetoric was used for political calculation and was just political marketing, and whether he will continue to implement a pragmatic policy or give priority to nationalism and xenophobia. So Fico colleagues, for whom his approach to justice and Russia was already unacceptable, broke away from Smer under the leadership of Peter Pellegrini, and the new established voice, Slovak Social Democracy, also clearly distanced itself from the political line of its former chairman in the party program. The voice, or in Slovak language, hlas, considers Slovakia's membership in the EU and NATO as a guarantee of the free development of our nation. We can read in the party program, we will cooperate only with parties that will not question or threaten membership in both of these organizations. So referring to Russian aggression, the program writes, we reject any violent change of borders and will support those who have become victims of aggressions. The voice also programmatically subscribes to the left. So he wants to promote the concept of a strong state and prevent the abuse of crisis for the enrichment of a narrow group of people or multinational companies at the expense of weaker ones, he states. So, and what about Slovak National Party? So the Slovak National Party has been active on the political scene since the Slovak National Revival, but didn't make it to the parliament in the last elections. Slovak National Party has the strongest support, especially among people over the age of 60. On its website, the party writes about itself that in the uncertain environment of the globalizing world, it promotes the protection of statehood, the nation, and the individual against the negative effects of demoralization, loss of orientation, and traditional values. So all parties from the extreme right part of the spectrum share several common features. They are Eurosceptic, they don't believe in the North Atlantic Alliance, they allegedly support Christian or traditional values, which include things like the ban on abortion or opposition to homosexuals. So based on these results, we can, of course, summarize this kind of positive view on the election results. So Russia didn't win, nor opposition to Ukraine. It was not even a key theme of the campaign. So parties that see Slovakia's future in the West have a clear, even constitutional majority of votes in the parliament. So no one party wants to leave the European Union or NATO. And the threat from the constitutional majority with the fascists to the outbreak of riots didn't materialize in these elections. So based on the study political parties programs, we can assume the following orientation of Slovak foreign and security policy. In reality, this scenario is based on the formal confirmation of Slovakia foreign policy direction, but the practical action of the government representatives will call into question the long-term priorities of the Slovak Republic in the EU and NATO. So in the context of the current conflict in Ukraine, for example, Slovakia will formally vote for the continuation of sanctions against Russia, but domestically, government representatives will portray such a position of the EU as a harmful. Slovakia can also suspend military aid to Ukraine and focus only on humanitarian and supplies. The potential negative impact on the domestic armed defense industry may bring about a reassessment of this position next month. In the end, at the end of the day, the government maybe will not create obstacles for Slovak ammunition producers to export their production to Ukraine. Ukraine's membership in NATO will be considered by the government as an unrealistic option. During EU enlargement, emphasis will be placed on equal opportunities for all candidate countries, but rejecting any privileging of Ukraine. At the EU level, although structural factors, let's mention in particular membership in the Eurozone, will not allow Slovakia to create an autonomous fiscal policy and question the existence of the EU. Slovakia can be included among the skeptics regarding the deepening of European integration and, on the contrary, a strong supporter of the intergovernmental approach. A frequent topic of political discourse will be the question of sovereignty, the application of which in the framework of European policies will be perceived as an essential issue, at least for a part of the coalition parties in the government. So Slovakia will perceive the exercise of sovereignty through the veto tool, which it will excessively implement in various votes at the EU level. So in non-frontal areas of European policies, there will be no escalation of tension with the EU institution and the activation of repressive measures by Brussels. The often unconstructive attitude of Slovakia will be manifested rather in its marginalization within the EU. So although Slovakia will continue to present itself as a constructive partner, questioning some European solution and blocking the implementation of selected European policies will move it from the position of a constructive partner to the position of an actor whose decision will sometimes be difficult to predict. Bilateral relations with the neighbors will remain without significant changes. The government will perhaps seek closer relationships with Hungary, but by approaching the position of Budapest in selected areas. As a part of regional cooperation, the government will promote the preservation of all existing formats. From time to time, it may be critical of pro-Ukrainian and anti-Russian position of Poland and Czech Republic. In the area on the security of defense, although Slovakia will not question NATO membership, it will only be involved in activities with alliance partners on an irregular basis and will not act proactively. So he will uncritically highlight the importance of European security and defense cooperation, even at the expense of the development of transatlantic relations. So some of the government representatives will sympathize with the content shared by the so-called alternative media, while the issue of objectification of the assessment of the conflict in Ukraine and its actors will be brought to the fore. So thanks to the government support, the disinformation ecosystem will be stronger, more resistant, and more popular in Slovak society, which will, however, cause significant social and economic damage. Strategic communication and the fight against disinformation will cease to be a priority. On the contrary, the narrative about the need for a balanced foreign and security policy and the associated openness to negotiate with all countries that show an interest in negotiations, not excluding Russia, will be promoted. So this is something what I would like to say about our results, our election results. And at the end of my presentation, I would like to introduce you our very specific project because this project was has very success. It was really creative initiative of our researchers. This voting advisory application born from a collaboration between our university and the European Institute in Florence, and this election compass reached a diverse audience with version available in Slovak, Hungarian, and English language. This application offered users 39 statements across 5 dimensions, with additional optional question about age, education, and gender, and it further delved into users' political preferences and collected email addresses from those willing to share. So if we look at the states, out of 270,000 initiated session and staggering more than 134,000 were completed. And so what's on the horizon for the election compass team is there is a slew of additional exciting research projects lined up on top of the election compass data. And these encompass a detailed post-election survey, a comprehensive study into the nostalgic influence on voting, survey experiments with seniors on policy evaluation, and investigation into non-pragmatic factors driving voting choices. We are very proud on this very useful, very successful project, and it helps crystallizing opinion of the voters in these elections. So thank you for your attention. I'm ready to answer you on the session Q&A. So thank you.
So much, Professor Terem. Thank you. Okay, so we went from Poland to Slovakia. Now we're going to go west and south to Spain and back to this summer. And we're welcoming Julián Casanova. Julián, nice to see you again.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Zubrzycki, dear Geneviève. Good afternoon.
Julián was here for a full year, so he's part of the family.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. And good afternoon from Zaragoza, Spain. It is a pleasure to be again at an event of the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia, sharing it with such prestigious colleagues. And first of all, allow me to send a special greeting to the members of the administration and staff of the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia. I remember you with affection, and I think you know it. On Sunday, thank you. On Sunday, July 23, 2023, general elections were held in Spain. No party obtained the required majority to form a government. 3 months later, it has not yet been possible to form a government. It was expected that the Popular Party and Vox, V-O-X, right-wing and far-right, opposition in recent years to the government of the socialist Pedro Sánchez, would obtain an absolute majority. But they didn't achieve it because there was a high turnout, 70%, not like Poland, but a high turnout and a broad mobilization against the possibility that Vox would be in government with the Popular Party. But the Popular Party was the most voted party in the elections. Beyond the electoral results, the first observation in the field of the right, ultra-right, is that the Popular Party, and I would like to stress this, has no presence, not even one deputy, in the Basque Country, and little presence in Catalonia. This leads to a first worrying conclusion. A party that calls itself national, which has governed Spain on several occasions, has no or little representation in the two autonomous communities, as we call the different regions in Spain, with a diverse cultural, linguistic identity. They speak Catalan and they speak Euskera, and together with Madrid, the two most developed areas of Spain. Pedro Sánchez, president of the government, leader of the Socialist Party, to whom many polls predicted a resounding defeat, won more seats than in the previous elections and obtained enough support with his left-wing allies to block the arrival of the ultra-right to the Spanish government. However, the main issue for Pedro Sánchez is that he has to be supported by all the parties opposed to the right and ultra-right, and that means that they have to vote for him in the Congress the day he presents himself for his investiture. Feijóo, leader of the Popular Party, already failed in his attempt. Sánchez needs the support of the left-wing parties, Sumar and Podemos, and the Basque and Catalan nationalists. From the Basque Country, he is not going to have opposition. But from Catalonia, the independentists are asking him, in order to give him the support, the amnesty of the people condemned for the independence referendum process of 2017 and a referendum of self-determination in the future. A very difficult negotiation, and one that has put on a war footing the entire political and media. The media is very influential, right and ultra-right wing. The ultra-right wing of Vox, which already governs with the Popular Party in several autonomous communities, including Aragon, where I live, and in many important city councils like Zaragoza, my city, didn't manage to reach the central Spanish government, something that would have meant a point of no return in major political, social, and cultural issues that are part of the current and global debate on democracy. The ultra-right part of the ultra-rightist parties are a fragment, a very important part of the blackest history of Europe until 1945 and of Spain until 1978. In the first years of the transition to democracy in Spain, after Franco's death in November 1975, the Francoist ultra-right and neo-fascist groups had some presence in the streets and in terrorist attacks, but in the first democratic elections in Spain after 40 years, in June 1977, no ultra-right party had parliamentary representation. They only had one deputy in the 1977 elections, and then for more than 30 years, and I would like to stress this, political Francoism and the ultra-right disappear from the electoral map. Although from the beginning of this century, there began to exist a strong media ultra-right that has been the fundamental seed for the birth and initial growth of Vox. Vox was created in 2013, 38 years after Franco's death, and did not begin to have electoral strength until after 2017, when it opposed head-on the independence process in Catalonia. Its ideas on the unity of Spain, ultranationalism, historical revisionism with opposition to historical democratic memory, its anti-immigration positions, and against gender policies began to broaden its social basis, connecting Vox to the main far-right parties in Europe. In Spain, we had not any party, an ultra-rightist party, after or until, the creation of Vox. In the November 2019 elections, Vox won 15% of the vote with 52 deputies. In the July 2023 elections, it dropped to 12% with 33 seats in parliament. The new ultra-right, Vox, contrary to the ultra-right wing of the 1930s, doesn't need to reject parliamentary democracy or close or destroy parliaments, nor is it on its agenda to offer radical solutions for the systematic elimination of its opponents. It is enough to undermine democracy from within, to make it more fragile, to break its ethical political perspectives, to turn anti-immigration and anti-feminism and the taking of Spain, the new reconquest, into the center of a new white, Christian, and authentically Spanish culture. And to seek all this in the name of freedom, going, as has already happened in other countries, over the heads of those who resist. Vox already become respectable, and in this path, it has been sponsored by the Popular Party and important business and communication groups. After the elections, the king entrusted Alberto Núñez Feijóo, leader of the Popular Party, the most voted party, with the formation of the government. But he didn't obtain a sufficient majority in parliament. The king then entrusted Pedro Sánchez, leader of the Socialist Party, to present himself in parliament for election as president, but he has not yet done so because he's in negotiations with the pro-independence parties in Catalonia. Sánchez has until November 27 for a majority in parliament to elect him president. If he fails to do so before that date, November 27, elections would have to be repeated in January 2024. If Sánchez fails to form a government and there is a repeat election, the Popular Party and Vox would have a second chance and possibly achieve their goal to form a government together. If Sánchez form a government, and I think he will get it, years of sound and fury await him because the right and ultra-right will not recognize his legitimacy. They will call it a government of terrorists and pro-independence supporters. Frankenstein government is what the right and ultra-right has called Sánchez government in the last years. And I conclude, in European and international terms, not only in Spain, the continuity of Sánchez is the best guarantee of the preservation of democratic values, with a notable presence of social policies. But the uncertainty about Catalonia will condition the implementation of these policies and the negative perception of millions of citizens in Spain who believe that Spain will break up and that Sánchez is the number one enemy of the unity of Spain. A key issue to understand the history of Spain since the beginning of the 20th century, especially after the coup d'etat by Franco in July 1936, the Spanish Civil War, and the long Franco's dictatorship. Thank you very much for your attention.
So we started with an optimistic scenario, and now we have a very pessimistic one. And now we turn to the Netherlands, and we hope to have somewhat nothing in the middle. We don't know. This is more predictive, prospective. Elections will take place next month.
Yeah, 22nd of November.
So Annemarie, that's...
Is this working with this?
It will...
Is everybody hearing me? Yes, okay.
Turn on yours.
It is on. Am I... It's good? Okay, here we go. I'd like to see if I can see my presentation. So I don't have results. Also, I'm not going to give deep analyses of what the previous election results have been. So this is a very far along slide. So I'm trying to get to the beginning slide. Yes, thank you very much. So just quickly, so elections that happen, I'm going to have to disambiguate the term Netherlands for a minute. So the Netherlands is a kingdom with 4 nation states in it, 3 in the Caribbean, St. Martin, Curaçao, and Aruba, and a 4th nation state, which also goes by the name Netherlands. So both a kingdom and a country. The nation state of the Netherlands is what's going to go to elections at the end of November, and that nation state is located in Europe, but also, again, in the Caribbean, in 3 colonized islands called Bonaire, Saba, and St. Eustatius. And the people on these islands vote in these elections in November. and are, as I said, currently colonized. We can go to, go there. So I'm starting you at a point in time in 2017 when I was asked to weigh in on the Dutch elections at that time. Since then, there have been two stepped down governments, both times stepped down over institutional racism and xenophobia, one this past summer. But at that point, I was asked to weigh in on this party that's an anti-Islam party called the PVV, which was slated to become the biggest party in the country. Now, that didn't happen. It became the second biggest party in the country. So it is, what I'm going to talk about is this particular brand of Dutch populism that is very, very deeply steeped in Islamophobia. And here you see a ballot, just very quickly how this works. There's always a ton of parties. I lifted out a couple that are like full platform parties. They weigh in on everything under the sun, from education to foreign affairs to health. And then there are sort of special interest parties. Here they would be lobbies in our United States. And so one of them that my students always love is the Pirate Party, which is a party for internet piracy, not the patch. And then there's even a non-voters party, which is an obstructionist party, which says, I want to have a seat in parliament so I can obstruct. So this is the Dutch system. And then in number 3, that was before, at this time of these elections, the face of Dutch right-wing populism, the PVV. This is the party leader, Geert Wilders. And so they became the second biggest party at that time. This is a slide of their campaign ad. It goes on and on with very horrible music. And really, they are a special interest party. And so when you see here, they're really one of those blue parties. They have only one party platform, which is kick Islam out of the Netherlands. But they have now become contenders for government because they're so big. So party leader found guilty of inciting hatred. So they're called the PVV. And from that party, additional parties have sprung up, including this party, the FVD, the Forum for Democracy, which is a straight up white supremacist party. I call them elitist populist, which sounds like a contradiction in terms. They are against the political elite, but they're very much elitist in terms of Rome, Greece, and the cradle of Western civilization. This man lying on his grand piano is the party leader who starts some of his speeches in parliament in Latin. Also, lots of particular, like very Nazist philosophies. So he talks about Hyperborea, that's the cradle, mythical cradle of the white man in Nordic lands, and to the Avondland, which is what the Nazis also talked about, like the end of white civilization, peddling in all sorts of conspiracy theories about white genocide. This party became the largest party in the midterm elections after that, in the Dutch Senate, after that 2017 election. And if anybody wants to doubt what I'm saying, because in the Netherlands, if I say this is a white supremacist party or this is a neo-Nazi party, people will push back on me hard, but I'm just letting you read some of their quotes. The person at the top has since formed her own new party, Ja 21, very much neo-Nazism. Their youth party, also unfortunately called the Youth Party, which sounds like it sounded in 4045, uses an SS slogan. And then on top of this, there's also a lot of glorification of colonialism. So the party leader going to South Africa and feeling that the Afrikaners there are in a genocide and wanting to repatriate these white people to the Netherlands. Immigrant skeptic, except for the white Afrikaners. Okay, so how does the Netherlands, how does my nation explain this right-wing populist sort of movement? So again, in this summer, when the government stepped down a second time over institutional racism and xenophobia, lots of the establishment politicians have left Dutch politics, and so they're always saying that the culprit is this populist movement. So the simplistic story that my country tells is that it all happened in the 1990s, during the multiculti 90s, when too many immigrants were let in, and then a populist movement sprung up initially by a man who peddled in all sorts of Islamophobia. Around the same time that a very well-known Dutch politician wrote that the Netherlands was in a dramatic state of multiculturalism. This was actually a communist. And around 9/11, and then this particular politician, this first populist, Islamophobic populist, was murdered, and then the next party springs up, the PVV, that I started my presentation with, and that party was sort of also at the same time that there was another murder, big political murder, committed against a filmmaker by a radicalized Islamic youth. From that, this neo-Nazi party and these other parties have sprung up. As a response, there have been some new parties in the Netherlands that have large non-white voter blocs, sort of as a response to this white nationalist politics. But I, of course, will argue, I'm an anti-colonist academic activist, that the story goes before. This didn't happen in the 90s. This is a kingdom that's oppressed, committed genocides against peoples all over this globe for many, many centuries. Just to give you an idea, in case you don't know about Dutch colonialism, and so the glorification still today of Dutch colonialism, the first African people in bondage were taken here on a Dutch boat with a signature on the boat of the ancestor of my current Dutch king. Taking it to Indonesia, this is the father of the Dutch welfare state, very much the Dutch left, who extorted Indonesia to the count of $103 current billion to pay for its freedom in 1949. Socialism at home, fascism abroad. This here is very recent, so it wasn't really, I was taught as a kid, 1917 is full free voting rights for everybody, but it didn't really happen until 2010, so very recently, where the people in the Dutch Caribbean have equal voting rights, very recent. That's the deepest hidden story. I want to stand here for a minute and realize whose land we're standing on, of native peoples, and the Dutch being one of the architects of the native genocide here. So this is another price of Dutch colonialism. And it's a difficult story to tell. And in the Netherlands, people will immediately say, I'm engaging in identity politics when I do this. But I think it's important to realize what's going on with this Dutch extreme right. This is the man of the Islamophobic party who dyes his hair blonde because he used to be called the N-word of the town he was born in. The man on the piano there and the woman who likes to read Mein Kampf. Those three ringleaders of Dutch white nationalist politics all have brown foremothers in Indonesia. Dutch colonist men spent centuries raping indigenous Indonesian women. The children of these women, if they were recognized by this white colonist men, they would get European rights. And they started doing a lot of the bidding of the white man. These are now the protectors of whiteness in the Netherlands. This is deep colonial trauma. Nobody in the Netherlands talks about this. So this is somebody from this community, the Dutch Indies community, describing this intermediate layer, what it means, what these people faced for centuries and centuries. And so I believe populism in the Netherlands can never be talked about without colonialism. So there you have the three, let me call them white nationalist parties. And currently, a very white voter bloc and party called the Civilian Farmers Movement has joined them. You see their protests. I never knew that was a Confederate flag in the Netherlands. I thought it was the flag of the Dukes of Hazzard. But so this party, they've dabbled in all sorts of fascistoid language. They've since stepped that down, and they're now sort of the right voting bloc, the right populists, if you will. So what's the current political situation? We used to have an establishment party in the mid-left called D66. They've kind of dwindled. And now, suddenly, there is a center populist party. And they are looking to be the biggest populists in the country. So center, so at the center. And so who is the center going to govern with? That's really the question after the November. And we call this polder politics. Polder is Dutch water managed land. Sort of like negotiating across the aisle what's going to happen. Like we all have to manage and survive this water landscape together. So 30 seats, that's a lot. 76 seats is a majority. It's always going to be a coalition government. Very fragmented at the moment after all these mainstream establishment politicians have left. They might govern with the right. It's harder to see the muting, but the right populist parties or some of the more established right parties, they might govern with the left. Left populist, the Socialist Party. Socialism, just channeling the father of the Dutch welfare state who extorted Indonesia. Socialists, and that's why left and right are so hard to talk about in the Netherlands. It's socialism for white people. So even the party leader says that she doesn't like anti-racist wokeness because it is no concern to code word ordinary people. In other words, native white Dutch people. So this is what's happening. We might get a purple cabinet. What we call is when they go across the aisle from left to right. That's the other thing that could be happening. But a lot of people are moving into this party here in the center, a completely new formed party. People have all sorts of hopes. They kept their party program till last night. I haven't really analyzed it, so last night it came out very late. I think they just wanted to get everybody on board before they were saying what they were going to do. It feels very immigrant skeptic again. But I want to say this. The party leader there on the left, in the past decade, sat together with the people of Oranje. That is a new apartheid town in South Africa. The apartheid flag there based on the Dutch, let's call it the Dutch Confederate flag. Just having a happy coffee with the new apartheid people. And so my take on these elections is there's nativist racists on the left, in the middle, on the right, in the Netherlands, in the country that thinks it's progressive, right? Coffee shops, red light district, first gay marriage. We know the stories. My concern is about the people on Bonaire, Saba and St. Eustatius. That's where my attention lies. 22% voter turnout in the Netherlands, around 80. Exclusion, colonialism. Thank you.
Okay, so Poland is saving the day. So we are running overtime. It's 1:12. We have 18 minutes, and I think it might be best. Instead, I wanted to have a conversation among panelists, but I think we'll open it to Q&A. If we have questions right away, we'll start. And perhaps in your answers, you might have time to also, if you want to respond to some of the other presentations you heard. So we have one, Zarina, and then Roman.
Thank you very much. I'm Zarina.
It's not on.
Thank you for your interesting presentations. I'm Zarina, Weiser Fellow here. So I have a couple of questions, starting from the first presentation about Poland. It was very impressive to know this ideological differences in the political landscape of Poland. And we have seen from this one of the graphs that since the voter turnout increases, the center is increasing to support to the center political parties. So I was wondering, how usually in parliamentary democracies, the important phase is also post-election negotiations and agreements. And we see that left and center could have chances to achieve certain agreements, but when we look at the distribution of the seats and mandates in the parliament, there was 194 for the former government, right? So what's your perspective or explanation? How is it possible to get post-election negotiations and forming the new government? What will be the difficulties there because of these ideological differences? And the second was about Slovakian elections. When I was looking at the kind of ideological differences between the parties, especially with regard to the foreign policy orientation with EU and NATO memberships, it seemed for me that unfortunately Slovakia is a voice of Russia within European Union and NATO. And how this is compatible with the recent statements by Charles Michel and the other key leaders of the EU who say that the enlargement is the priority of European Union. And final question is about Dutch democracy. So we know that the Arjen Lipart developed this concept of consultational democracy based on the Dutch democracy because we hear a lot of voices there, including the colonial voices, including the radical voices. But I'm wondering what's the effects of the colonial legacies and past for nowadays democracy in Netherlands. Thank you.
Are you sure you don't have one for Spain? Because then that would allow each speaker to respond. And so thank you so much for your question. I think that's a great way to get us started. So let's go in the order.
So the formation of the new government is going to be very smooth because they've already, during the campaign, declared that they are going to create a coalition. So there's really no concern there. Now, exactly how that's going to be constituted, who's going to get what, ministry and all that is currently being discussed and negotiated. Those negotiations will be intense, but it's not going to be a big issue because most of the major issues have been already dealt with. So it will go smoothly. Now, as they begin to govern, that will create some problems because there are some in this coalition that have very different views on some of the key issues. Most specifically, abortion rights is going to be a big problem. Even though the public support is overwhelmingly towards a liberalization of abortion rights, one of the coalition partners, the so-called Third Way grouping, is more conservative and is hesitant. So we don't know where that's going to go. That could lead to some major problems. But the main thing is the main thing that all of them agree on is that there needs to be a redemocratization of the country. And that's going to keep them busy for quite some time. Simply cleaning up after 8 years of authoritarian rule is going to come before any really reform measures of any kind are going to happen. And so I don't think there will be any short-term problem in maintaining a coalition. Although as we push this towards, third, fourth year in power, yes, it is possible that there could be tensions.
Peter, are you still with us?
Of course, thank you very much for this question. Slovakia is a member of both NATO and European Union. It was among the handful of European countries pushing for tough EU sanction against Russia and has donated a large amount of military equipment to Ukraine. So, according to a survey by Globsec, a Bratislava-based security think tank, only 40% of Slovaks believe Russia was responsible for the war in Ukraine. So the lowest proportion among the 8 Central and Eastern European and Baltic states. Globsec focused on. So in the Czech Republic, which used to form one country with Slovakia, 71% of people blame Russia for the war. The same research found that 50% of Slovaks perceive the United States, the country's long-term ally, as a security threat. So yes, true. We see, of course, there is a big, the campaign was marked by concerns over disinformation, and a lot of evidence show us that how effective social media companies have been in countering Russia propaganda in Slovakia.
Annemarie?
Yeah, so colonialism and democracy. So colonialism, of course, is anti-democracy in and of itself. And so this thing I said of socialism at home, fascism abroad, I think it's easy for anti-democratic values to also seep into the national stage. You see this most with the right-wing populist parties, things you hear here also of like, blacklists for teachers, that kind of stuff, that kind of anti-democracy. But I would say it doesn't just live on the Dutch right. This anti-democracy lives on the left also. When you see anti-racist and anti-colonial activists, lots of state repression, people being preventatively arrested for protesting, those kinds of anti-democracies. And they always are tied to either anti-racism or anti-colonial protests, which is also where you can see that it's a colonial problem, this. And so it comes into the country. There's plenty of anti-democratic things. It's not that there's a clear anti-democratic party. Although I would say the FVD, the Forum for Democracy on the right, has lots of anti-democratic language.
I know we have other questions, but I want to give the opportunity to Professor Casanova to also chime in here, because I think that what you did also, like Annemarie did, was to really contextualize, give the historical context for the elections, and to really ground the current issue in Spain's fascist past, which is still very present. So I wonder if you want to say something about this a little bit more, and especially regarding the likelihood that there will be other elections again in January if they cannot solve the issue by November.
Well, some people think that Spain is very divided in two blocks, and so 50-50 or something like that, but it's not true. I mean, Spain is a very complex and plural country. There are at least 10 parties in the parliament with good representation to negotiate everything. And then we have this Catalonia with speaking Catalan, Euskadi speaking Euskera, Galicia speaking Gallego, kind of a Roman language next to Portuguese. And so my take is that Sanchez is going to be able to form a government with many problems, especially from the independentists in Catalonia. And my take also is that there is more, everything related to Catalonia now is more aggressive in theory than in practice. And two explanations. One, the Socialist Party won the elections in Catalonia. The general elections was the most voted party, far away from the other. That means that in the period of Sanchez's government, Sanchez did everything to block the possibility to Catalonia growing in favor of independence. This is a very interesting point. And the paradox is that Esquerra, they are Republicans. And Junts, I mean the center-right party independentist in Catalonia, they only won 14 deputies, 7 and 7, and they are influencing Spanish politics. This is the real point. And by the way, in the Basque Country, they can call them terrorists or they can call them everything, but probably is today is the most equal and let's say less divided society in Spain.
There was, okay, so I want this and then Roman Revand.
So my question is to Professor Casanova again. In 2017, I lived in Galicia, so it was really interesting to follow the Catalonia elections from another autonomous state that didn't really share the opinions of that state. And my question, you briefly mentioned in your talk about the after Franco period of Spain, how Franco dies and kind of immediately we have democratic elections, and until recently, for at least a couple of decades, Spain didn't have nationalist representation in the parliament, and I would probably in the society either. So this is really a more 21st century phenomena that we see more of the discourse coming up again. And it's really interesting how it seems like Spain, the memory politics of the Spanish either government or the society in general as well, maybe subconsciously didn't really talk what happened during Franco's time. And so the post-Franco period, so there was no transitional justice, if I'm not mistaken, either happening. So my question is, do you see any at all, is there any connection between these voices rising now in the society, in the political scenery as well, and maybe the lack of or the absence of this talking about the past or having a transitional justice right after Franco? Thank you.
Well, it's a very interesting question, especially for a historian, no? But I think that the turning point in Spanish politics was 2017 with the independence process in Catalonia. And before, we didn't have any ultra-rightist movement, and this is a key factor to understand something in Spain. It's true that they were under the umbrella of the Popular Party. And talking or regard to democratic memory and the past, there are three different factors. On the one hand, historiography and the analysis of the past is in good health, absolutely, in comparison with other countries studying the 20th century, no question about it. The second point is that in spite of that, there is there are divided memories, basically because for many years, there was only one memory, the memory of the victors of the Spanish Civil War, and the vanquished, and the memory of the vanquished was forgotten. Okay, and so there are divided memories about that. And the third point, very important, is that there are a lot of political use and abuse of the past in Spain. And it's not only political opinions, but also ignorance or a kind of praise of or no praise of a knowledge about history. And so if we mix historiography, analyzing history, divided memories, and political use and abuse of the past, the situation is very complex. But I think in any society we have now this division, because France is very divided. If we go to Italy, it's very divided. Greece is very divided. I mean, I am talking about Mediterranean countries, and Portugal, no? It's also very divided. So I don't think Spain is so special talking about this. And finally, the legacy of the Catholic Church. No, the Catholic Church was the only religion, Catholicism, for many years. And however, at the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century, Spain was one of the most liberal countries, talking about abortion, same-sex marriages. And so it's so paradoxical, everything happening in Spain, but I think there are plenty of paradoxes also in other countries.
Thank you. We have time for one last question, a very brief one, and a very brief response, otherwise we need to leave the room very soon.
Yes, I'm going back to optimistic example, Poland, but the question is relating to everybody, because in Poland the results are astounding because, means between others, but because extremely rigged campaign, election campaign. The overwhelming access to the money by the Peace Party, the government money, is huge. And talking about Mr. Casanova, a Catholic Church in Poland was absolutely one-sided. So the question is the campaign no longer as important in any elections? Is the propaganda no longer working, although in Slovakia, obviously Russian propaganda is working? Is the social media alleviating the campaign as we knew so far? That could be the result that Poland was not responding to the rigged campaign.
Thank you. Brian?
I would hesitate to make any broad statements because I think that in every case there are so many local contextual factors. This is the historian speaking, right? That I would be very, very, very reluctant to say that, you know, campaigns matter more, campaigns matter less. You know, I'm not sure that any such generalization could be made. I think the campaign, you know, campaigning doubtlessly matters. The peace did decline in its support because it ran an absolutely atrocious campaign. It had all the money in the world, but it had a message that was not resonating. And its message was entirely promoting conspiracy theories about the claims that all the other parties represented foreign interests. It was an entirely 100% negative campaign. That simply did not go over well, and some of the post-election polling has confirmed this, and you know, so that mattered. You know, the campaigning for you know, one of the main reasons why the so-called Third Way Party got as many votes as it did is because of an amazing debate performance by the leader of that party the Monday before the election. And he's a former television presenter and was just in his element, and he knocked all the questions out of the park. And he was widely viewed as the winner of that particular debate, a campaign moment. Yeah, campaigning matters. I think there were other forces that are probably more decisive here, but yeah, campaigning mattered.
On this note, as we also have our own campaigns starting soon already, a pre-campaign, I want to thank our speakers, especially those who are not here in flesh, but on Zoom. We know that it's late for you, so thank you very much for being with us today. And then thank you also to our two U of M specialists for participating in this panel, and thank you to the audience here in the room and also on Zoom. And until our next event, I want to thank you everyone for being here. Thank you.